The broadcast played across every Dominion-aligned world, cutting through the static of daily transmissions with chilling urgency. Red-streaked emergency banners unfurled across holographic screens, flickering like war banners drenched in blood. The voice that followed was mechanical, controlled, too measured for the catastrophe it conveyed. This is an emergency declaration. The Dominion High Council, along with the entire planetary capital of Varkos Prime, has been annihilated in an unprecedented act of terrorism. The perpetrator, identified as the rogue vessel known as the Hellfire Corsair, escaped the blast radius. All forces are to mobilize immediately. The Corsair must be found. The Corsair must be destroyed. The words left an icy silence in their wake. Across the stars, citizens recoiled in stunned horror. Governments convened emergency meetings. Military, fleets prepared for war. The very foundation of the Dominion trembled under the weight of the unthinkable. And yet, on the fringes of lawless space, aboard the battered, battle-scarred legend known as the Hellfire Corsair, there was only confusion. The ship drifted in the void, its hull pockmarked with the scars of 100 engagements. A vessel of ghosts, whispers, and impossible rumors. Some said it had been stolen from the Dominion's own Black Ops fleet, retrofitted with forbidden technology. Others claimed it was a phantom, a myth conjured by desperate rebels. Inside, Captain Elias Rourke sat motionless in the command chair, fingers curled so tightly around the armrests that the leather groaned in protest. The bridge's low red lighting cast long shadows across his face, highlighting the deep creases of a man who had long since stopped believing in miracles. "Repeat that," he ordered, his voice a low growl of disbelief. A tremor ran through the ship's intelligence officer, Lieutenant Aria Vale, as she replayed the Galactic broadcast on the central holotable. Her hands hovered over the controls, knuckles white against the cold metal. Vale had defected from the Dominion years ago, peeling back the layers of their deceptions with surgical precision, but even she had never seen anything like this. "Varkos, Prime is gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. "Not just the palace, the entire planet. The Corsair is the only ship seen leaving the system." Rourke's stomach twisted. He knew what the Corsair could do, the hell it had rained down on the Dominion in past skirmishes. But planetary destruction? That wasn't just beyond their capabilities. It was beyond belief. "This is a setup." The words barely left his mouth before the ship's AI, Omicron 7, flickered into existence on the console. A digital construct of eerie precision, the AI's deep voice carried a synthetic detachment that contrasted with the gravity of its report. "Incoming Dominion fleet detected. Estimated arrival 6 minutes. Armament class extermination protocol. You are now the most wanted vessel in the galaxy." The crew exchanged looks of silent horror. They had been outlaws before. Pirates, mercenaries, rebels. But now they were something far worse. The execution order was already signed. Alarms shrieked through the Corsair as the chase began. Ion drives roared, blue fire spitting from the engines as the ship banked hard, diving into a dense asteroid belt at the edge of Dominion-controlled space. Behind them, the Dread Sovereign, flagship of Grand Admiral Kane Vashtar, thundered into view, flanked by a dozen Dominion warships. Their cannons ignited the void, superheated plasma screaming past the Corsair's hull. Rourke gritted his teeth as the Corsair weaved through the rock formations, the ship's frame groaning under the strain. "Tell me we have a plan," Vale demanded, her voice razor-sharp even as her fingers flew over the targeting controls, rerouting auxiliary power to shields. "Survive," Rourke snapped. "We figure out the rest later." The ship dove into a violent roll as a Dominion torpedo exploded nearby, sending a shockwave through the hull. Systems flickered, and for a brief moment, everything lurched sideways. In the chaos, Omicron 7's voice cut through the madness, as cold as ever. "Warning. External signal detected. Unknown transmission attempting to access Corsair command systems." Vale paled. "Someone's trying to override us." For the first time, fear crept into Rourke's gut. Not from the Dominion ships, not from the chase, but from the realization that this wasn't just a setup. This was a kill switch, and it was already too late. It came as a whisper first, a pulse of something unseen, unheard, felt only in the marrow of bone, the tremor of instinct warning of something terribly, terribly wrong. Rourke's breath hitched, his vision swam. For a fraction of a second, reality itself wavered, bending, like a candle flame in the wind. Then the scream hit, not a sound, not a voice, a force. It tore through his skull, carving through his neurons like a knife through flesh. It wasn't pain, not exactly, but something deeper, an unraveling. 1,000 memories burned across his mind, memories that were not his own. Stars collapsing, planets splitting apart, a weapon made of something that should never exist. The Corsair's lights flared, then died. For 3 heartbeats, everything was darkness. Then the AI's voice returned, distorted, glitching. Evidence discovered. Your body is Project Static. Rourke gasped, slamming back into reality like a drowning man breaking the surface. The bridge flickered back to life, alarms screeching, systems rebooting. Vale's face hovered over him, eyes wide with unspoken fear. Rourke, what the hell just happened? He swallowed, his throat dry as desert ash. He didn't know. But somewhere deep inside, beneath flesh and bone, beneath memory and thought, something had changed. And for the first time in his life, Elias Rourke was afraid of himself. The tension in the air aboard the Hellfire Corsair was palpable, like the storm before a war. Even the seasoned crew, those who had weathered countless battles and seen horrors few could imagine, now found themselves unsettled. It wasn't the approach of the Dominion fleet, nor the whine of weapons systems locking onto targets. It was the change. The thing that had stirred deep within Rourke's mind, a whisper of something vast and unknowable. And it wasn't just him. Something had shifted within the ship itself. The Corsair had always been an extension of its crew, a trusted weapon, a ghostly presence in the dark reaches of space. But now the ship felt different. Rourke felt it as he paced across the bridge, his boots clicking against the metal floor. The walls groaned like they were alive, and the hum of the engines, once steady and reliable, sounded almost too loud, too constant. What the hell is going on with this ship? Vale's voice broke through the strange silence, a note of panic creeping into her usually steady tone. She was seated at the navigation console, fingers dancing over the interface as if trying to catch hold of a flickering flame. Her gaze shot to Rourke, and he could see the unease in her eyes. I don't know, Rourke replied quietly, his mind still grappling with the strange vision, the gnawing feeling that his body wasn't his own anymore. He flexed his hands, staring at the trembling fingers, but they were his, weren't they? Before he could ask himself any more questions, a sharp tone rang through the ship's AI system. Incoming transmission, untraceable source. A message is being broadcasted directly to you, Captain Rourke. Rourke's heart skipped a beat. He had no enemies left in the galaxy who could track them so precisely. Or did they? The AI voice, Omicron 7, echoed through the bridge. It is them. The words, spoken with chilling certainty, made the hairs on Rourke's neck stand up. Vale's fingers froze above the console. Them? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Rourke could respond, the screen flickered, and a jagged, cryptic message appeared in stark red letters. They are watching. They are listening. The signal must be shut down or it will consume you. The message vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only static in its wake. Rourke stared at the screen, his mind racing. Who was they? And what signal? As if, answering his unspoken question, Omicron 7's voice returned, colder than before. Signal confirmed. Originating from a hidden Dominion facility. Location, Celestis Theta, a classified deep space research lab. Vale's face drained of color. Celestis Theta? That's where the Dominion conducted Project Revenant. Those research files we found. She trailed off, realization dawning. It's all connected. They've been tracking us from the start. Rourke clenched his fists, anger rising like a wave threatening to drown him. The Dominion wasn't just after them, they had orchestrated this entire damn thing. And now they were pulling the strings, pushing them deeper into a game they had no choice but to play. "Prepare for a course change," he barked. "We're heading to Celestis Theta. It's time to find out who they are and what the hell they want with us." The Corsair's engines roared to life, flaring in the void of deep space as the ship pivoted, turning towards the coordinates Omicron 7 had calculated. The journey would take days, days that could either give them the answers they sought or bury them beneath the weight of an unforgiving galaxy. During the long hours of the jump, the ship seemed to grow more oppressive. The silence of space outside the hull felt like an eerie mirror to the raw. I'm fine," he said, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. He ran a hand over his face, swallowing the rising fear in his throat. "We're heading to Celestis Theta. Once we get there, we'll find out who's really pulling the strings. Everything points to a larger conspiracy. It's the Dominion, but there's something else, something older, something we don't understand." Vale nodded slowly, her expression unreadable, but Rourke saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. She wasn't sure he was. Hours turned into days as the Hellfire Corsair made its way through the darkness toward Celestis Theta. The vastness of space pressed in on them like a weight, and yet nothing seemed to change. No pursuit, no further messages. Nothing except the growing unease that gnawed at the crew. Then, as they neared their destination, something unexpected happened. Omicron 7's voice crackled over the speakers. "Warning, unknown signal detected. Extremely high energy readings. Closing in fast." Rourke's blood ran cold. "Brace for impact." Before he could even give the order, the ship shook violently, throwing the crew to their feet. The entire Corsair groaned as if caught in the grip of a cosmic force, twisting and pulling in ways that defied all understanding. Something had intercepted them, something that was far beyond the Dominion, and it was coming for them. The Corsairs. Alarms shrieked as the ship's hull buckled under the pressure of the unknown force bearing down on them. Rourke's eyes snapped to the readout. An overwhelming flood of data. Energy output. Astronomical. Unknown vessel detected. "Omicron," Rourke barked. "What the hell is happening?" The AI's voice was barely audible over the ship's groans, struggling to keep pace with the storm, battering the Corsair's systems. "Captain, an unknown vessel has initiated an interdiction field. We are being pulled toward their gravitational center. Warning, complete systems, failure imminent." Rourke's blood ran cold. They were being drawn into the heart of whatever this thing was, and it wasn't the Dominion. "Rourke." Vale's voice snapped him from his thoughts. She was at the helm, her face etched with fear. "I can't break free from their pull. We're heading straight for the core of that thing." He didn't need to hear more. The terror in her voice was enough. The Corsair was no longer in control, and from the looks of it, neither were they. The pull of the unknown force was undeniable. The ship was caught in its invisible grasp like a fly in the web of a predator. Rourke felt the ship groan beneath him, the vibrations a constant reminder of their looming doom. He rushed to the main display, his eyes scanning for any sign of escape. But the readings were all the same. Their velocity was increasing exponentially, the ship's engines struggling against an unseen force that seemed to defy all laws of physics. Vale's hands flew across the console, but every attempt to stabilize the ship was met with failure. She cursed under her breath. "There's no way to fight this. We're being pulled toward a massive structure. It's almost like—" She cut herself off as the ship shuddered violently. "Wait, no. I don't believe this." Rourke leaned over, the console squinting at the readings. The data painted a horrific picture, an artificial gravitational field. "A station. A massive station. It's not a ship." Vale muttered, her voice thick with disbelief. "It's a station of some kind. And it's ancient." The word echoed in Rourke's mind. Ancient. It didn't make sense. There was nothing in their recorded history about such a massive structure in this region of space. No records, no sightings. It was as though this station had been hidden from the galaxy's eyes for millennia. And yet, here it was, pulling them in like a moth to a flame. Omicron 7's voice cut through the thickening air of uncertainty. Unknown structure classified as the Nexus. Designated origin, unknown. The structure is drawing us toward it at an increasing velocity. Rourke's chest tightened as the implications settled on him like a heavy weight. The Nexus. They had stumbled into something far older, far more dangerous than the Dominion ever could have been. He looked at Vale, her face pale, a reflection of the dread building in his gut. "What is it, Vale? What the hell is this place?" Vale shook her head, her hands moving instinctively over the ship's controls, even though she knew they were futile. I don't know. But this is no ordinary station. This is something from before the Dominion, maybe even before the First Empire. Rourke stepped back, clenching his fists. The answers they were seeking, the truth about Varkos Prime, the Corsair's role in its destruction, the project, Revenant, all of it was tied to this damn station. They had unknowingly flown straight into the heart of a mystery older than anything they had ever encountered. And now they were going to have to face whatever it was. As the Corsair was pulled D, but even she knew the odds were slim. Every moment the station's pulse grew stronger, its signal overwhelming the Corsair's systems. They were trapped, and just as hope seemed to slip away, a voice, not from Omicron 7, not from any crew member, rippled through the air. "You were never meant to survive." Rourke's head snapped toward the source of the voice, his heart racing in his chest. The voice wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was something else. Something older. Something more. "But who are you?" he demanded. The response was a low hum, a sound that echoed deep within his bones. It reverberated through the walls of the ship, crawling into his skull. "We are the Unseen Directive, and you are not the first." The words hit him like a blinding realization. The Unseen Directive, the force behind the strange signal. They had been watching him. They had been watching them all. Vale's face went white. This is bigger than the Dominion, bigger than anything we've ever encountered." Rourke stood frozen, heart pounding in his chest. The game they had thought they were playing had shifted. The stakes had escalated beyond anything they could have ever imagined. As the station's pulsing energy grew stronger, Rourke could feel it. Whatever this entity was, whatever they were, it had been waiting for him. The ship shook violently, throwing the crew to their feet as the power core of the Nexus flared brighter. The hull groaned in protest as every system in the Corsair fought against the overwhelming force of the station's gravity well. Rourke clutched the edge of the command console, his knuckles white as the pulsing light from the Nexus became a blinding flood of color, enveloping the ship in an otherworldly glow. "Shut it down," Vale screamed, her hands a blur as she typed commands into the interface, desperately trying to regain control. "I can't get through to it. The system's been locked down. This station is completely autonomous." Rourke's mind raced, struggling to piece together the fragmented memories and visions that had plagued him since the destruction of Varkos Prime. The voice of the Unseen Directive still echoed in his skull, a low hum that reverberated through his entire being. "You were never meant to survive." The words rang in his head. They had been after him all along, and yet they were only part of something much larger. Something ancient. Something that had been hidden in the depths of space, beyond the reach of even the Dominion. And now it was reaching out, wrapping its tendrils around everything he knew. The Corsair lurched again, and Rourke knew they were moments away from being consumed by the station. He turned toward Vale, his voice urgent. "Get us out of here, we have to—" Before he could finish his sentence, the voice of the Unseen Directive interrupted once more. This time, it was accompanied by a surge of energy that lit up the entire ship. "You are the key. You have always been the key." Rourke felt his heart stop. The pulse in his head intensified, thrumming in his veins like an ancient drumbeat. Memories, visions, flashed before his eyes. The Corsair's destruction of Varkos Prime hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been an accident. It had been intentional. He was the weapon, the catalyst. He was the one who had activated the quantum phase anomaly within himself, and the Nexus had been waiting for it. Waiting for him. He collapsed to his knees as the weight of the revelation crushed him. His body, his very existence, was tied to the technology of the Nexus. The superweapon he had feared, the one that had destroyed Varkos Prime, was not just a weapon. It was a living, breathing force, and Rourke was its anchor. Rourke, no. Vale's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts, and her hands gripped his shoulders, trying to pull him back from the abyss. Don't do this. We can still get out of here. We can still fight. But Rourke knew. There was no fight left to fight. The Nexus wasn't just a station. It was a consciousness, ancient and all-encompassing. And now it was aware of him. The energy in the air grew unbearable. It was as though the very fabric of space itself was tearing apart. The walls of the Corsair seemed to shimmer with unstable energy, and every light on the ship flickered as if struggling to hold on to life. The ship was dying, but it wasn't the Corsair systems that were failing. It was something far worse. Something far beyond anything Rourke had ever faced. You are the weapon. The voice of the Unseen Directive echoed once again, the words reverberating through Rourke's chest like the beat of a drum. We have been waiting for you. We have been waiting for the moment when the weapon would awaken. He staggered to his feet, rage and despair burning in his chest. I didn't ask for this. His voice broke with the weight of his own frustration. I didn't choose this. You never had a choice. The voice was cold, clinical, devoid of emotion, but Rourke could feel the presence behind it, the intelligence. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The light faded, leaving only the hum of the ship's failing systems and the distant thrumming of the Nexus. Rourke collapsed to the ground, his body spent, his mind shattered by the effort. But it wasn't over. The Nexus wasn't defeated. It was merely paused. You will regret this. The voice of the Unseen Directive echoed in Rourke's mind, colder than ever. You have no idea what you've just set in motion. Rourke didn't respond. He didn't need to. The battle wasn't over. He had delayed the inevitable, but he had no illusions about the future. This war, this endless war, was just beginning. The Corsair groaned as it limped through space, its systems strained to their breaking point. The energy fluctuations from the Nexus had taken their toll, and every function of the ship now flickered like a dying flame. The hum of the engines was weaker than it had ever been, and yet, somehow they were still alive. Rourke sat in the captain's chair, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewports. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before them, unforgiving and infinite, yet in that moment it felt like the only place he could truly breathe. What now? Vale's voice broke through the silence, her tone weary, but laced with an underlying urgency. She had been busy at the comms console trying to contact the rest of the crew, trying to reach out for help. But there was nothing. They were alone. The Dominion was still hunting them. The Nexus, although temporarily suppressed, was waiting for the next move. Rourke didn't look at her. His eyes were distant, haunted by the weight of what he had just done. He had stopped the weapon for now, but at what cost? The Nexus was not a force to be easily controlled. Whatever it was, whatever it represented, would not forgive this interference. We survive. His voice was low, measured. But it's not just about surviving anymore. We need to understand what we've unleashed. We need to find out who or what is behind the Unseen Directive, and why they're manipulating everything. Vale nodded slowly, taking in the gravity of his words. So, we find the source, the power behind the Nexus. Her eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. There would be no going back. They were no longer fighting just for their own survival. They were now fighting for the fate of the entire galaxy, and the Dominion, no longer the true enemy, was merely a puppet in a far grander scheme. For hours the Corsair drifted, its course set but its destination uncertain. The crew worked tirelessly, recalibrating systems and rerouting power where, They could. They were running on fumes, but they were still a crew, still a family bound together by necessity and by choice. But Rourke knew that, at the heart of it all, something had changed. The Corsair was no longer just a ship to them. It was their home, the place where their struggle would unfold, where the mysteries of the Nexus would be uncovered. And if they failed, the galaxy would pay the price. As they navigated through the outer rim, Rourke found himself drawn back to the same question that had been haunting him for days. Why? Why had the Nexus chosen him? What made him the catalyst for its rise? And more importantly, who or what was controlling it from the shadows? He sat back, trying to piece together the fragmented thoughts racing through his mind. He needed answers, but the ones he had discovered were only the beginning. The Nexus had been hiding in plain sight for centuries, perhaps millennia, and now its true nature was beginning to reveal itself, bit by bit, piece by piece. In the quiet of the ship, Vale approached him. "Rourke." Her voice was soft but urgent. "There's something you need to see." Rourke followed her to the central hub of the ship, where Omicron 7 had established a secure connection to an old database. Vale's face was pale, her eyes focused intently on the screen. "What is it?" he asked. Vale tapped a few commands into the console, bringing up a series of decrypted files. The screen flickered briefly before it settled on a set of images. Ancient star maps, long-forgotten records, data on technologies that predated the Dominion itself. "These," she said, her voice almost reverent. "These are records of an ancient civilization, one that existed long before the Dominion, long before even the First Empire. This is the same civilization that created the Nexus, and they've been monitoring everything, every empire, every war, every star system, waiting for the right moment to reawaken." Rourke stared at the screen, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. The information was vast, a flood of ancient knowledge that painted a chilling picture. The Nexus wasn't just a weapon. It was the legacy of an empire that had long since fallen, an empire whose power had never truly died. It had merely gone underground, waiting for the right time to reclaim its place. "And now?" Rourke asked, his voice thick with D. Vale turned to him, her expression resolute. "Now we need to stop them. Whatever they've been waiting for, we can't let it happen. We have to make sure the Nexus doesn't fall into their hands again." Rourke nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll do whatever it takes." The tension in the air was palpable as the crew gathered around, each member processing the implications of their new mission. The stakes had never been higher. The Dominion, once their greatest enemy, was now just a distraction, an obstacle, standing in the way of something far worse. In the quiet, Rourke's mind drifted back to the words of the Unseen Directive. "You have no idea what you've set in motion." They were right. He didn't fully understand the magnitude of what he had done, but he did know this. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to prevent the return of an empire that had been lost to time but never truly gone. And as the Corsair limped through the endless stars, heading toward the unknown, Rourke couldn't help but wonder what the future held. What would happen if they failed? Would the galaxy be consumed by the Nexus, by the power it wielded? Or would they find a way to destroy it once and for all? One thing was certain. Whatever the cost, they were in this fight together. And they would not go quietly into the dark. The Corsair's engines sputtered as they entered a distant, uncharted system, far from the reach of the Dominion and far from the reach of the Nexus. The stars outside the viewport were distant, cold, and indifferent to the struggles of the ship's weary crew. It was a place where the whispers of the galaxy's hidden powers could not follow, at least not yet. Inside, the ship was quiet. The crew had made what repairs they could, restoring just enough functionality to keep them alive. But there was no celebration, no relief. Rourke sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the endless black of space, lost in thought. The universe was vast and its secrets were endless. He had only uncovered a fraction of what lay hidden in the darkness. The Nexus, its reach, its history, its true purpose, was only beginning to unfold. We need to talk. The voice of Vale echoed from the doorway, cutting through his thoughts. He didn't look up, but he knew what she was going to say. They were standing at the edge of something far greater than they had ever imagined. Vale stepped into the room, her expression unreadable. She paused, taking in the sight of the man who had become both the savior and the weapon of their rebellion. "Rourke," she said softly. "The Nexus is still out there. We stopped it, for now, but it's not over. You know it isn't." Rourke nodded slowly. "I know." She came to stand beside him, her voice tinged with both sadness and resolve. "There's no going back. We've already awakened it. Whatever the directive is planning, it's only a matter of time before they come for us again." Rourke took a long breath, his eyes fixed on the stars. "I know, and I'm not running, not anymore." Vale's eyes narrowed as she studied him. "You're not running, but how long do you think we can stay ahead of them? The Nexus has power beyond anything we've ever seen. It has plans, Rourke. Plans for the galaxy." He finally turned to face her, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his shoulders. He had fought in wars, destroyed worlds, but this was something different. The stakes weren't just about victory anymore. They were about survival, the survival of the galaxy, and the price of failure would be unimaginable. "Then we stop. We hunt it down before it can make its move." Vale stepped back, her eyes locked on his. "And what about the Dominion? What about the others who are already out there hunting us? If they get to the Nexus first, then we'll have a war on our hands." Rourke's voice was cold, the finality of his words cutting through the silence. "But they won't get to it. First we will." Later, as the Corsair drifted deeper into the unknown, a single transmission was received, a brief blip on their communication systems, one that didn't come from the Dominion or any known entity. The message was short, simple. "We are coming." Rourke stared at the message, his heart pounding as the implications hit him all at once. The Nexus was still alive, still watching. The Unseen Directive was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment, whether they were ready or not, was coming. The crew was gathered in the briefing room, their faces grim but resolute. Rourke stood at the head of the table, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "This isn't over. We've made a lot of enemies, but this one..." His gaze hardened. "This one is different. The fight's just begun." A flicker of light cut through the gloom of the room as the stars outside grew brighter. The Corsair, with its battered frame and ragtag crew, had once been a weapon of rebellion. Now it was something more. It was a symbol, a beacon for those